It's always the second I sit down to film that loud shit starts happening outside, but whatever. Hi, my name is Sunny. Welcome to A Sunny Book Nook. If you hear, that's my earrings jingling, if you hear the jingle. And then if you hear the cicadas outside, that's the cicadas chirping and having sex, I guess. But anyways, all of that aside, today I'm here to talk to you about the 10 books that I read in May. It's not technically the very end of May yet, so I'll probably read a couple more books within these last few days, but we'll see. Maybe not, because I've been kind of in a slower reading year. These past couple years I've read 127 or 137, 150, 200, 250 books, and this year my Goodreads goal is 100 books. So that's where we're sitting. Wait, I just ate watermelon, so let me reapply. I'm wearing Tower 28 Juice Balm in the shade Drink. So the first book that I finished in May was Boy Parts by Eliza Clarke, which I adored. I loved reading this book. It was such a good time. I read the majority of this on the New York City subway system and waiting at bars and whatever. So I also like in the train from Boston to Salem, Massachusetts, and all that. So reading on public transit is very important for me. I've heard about this book for so long now. I feel like I've heard about it for at least a year or two, about how much people who love literary fiction about terrible women should read it, and that is exactly what it is. That's exactly what's happening here. It's a literary fiction book about a really terrible woman. It's set in northern England. It's about this woman who is a photographer. Most of her subjects of her photography, which is like kind of like erotic portraiture, is of boys and men. And the way that she gets these subjects is just by encountering them out and about. And she is a very beautiful, traditionally beautiful woman who can like get any man she wants, basically. And so she ends up doing a lot of exploitative and fucked up things and all this with men who she ultimately just toys with. And she has a best friend who really is concerned about her and really loves her, it seems, even though our main character is a terrible friend and a cruel, manipulative, awful person. But at the same time, like, she's not flat. She's not just cruel, evil, and mean, though she is those things. And it's not even that she has any particular reason behind the way that she uses and abuses her power over people. It's more of that we understand how crazy she is. Like, her psychology is so twisted. The way that she approaches the world is in such a bleak, cruel way. She's like a predator in a world of like prey in a very literal way, but I think like it kind of has that American Psycho-esque storyline of like someone with some level of privilege who can get away with things, and at the same time she's always like dick measuring with regard to that privilege. And she's in the contemporary art world, and she went to, I think, CSM. She went to these really good art programs, these prestigious art programs, and she wants to be in the London art scene, and she's trying to break into it. We see a lot of that in this book. Her desires and what she desires, who she desires, what her past relationships have looked like, the grooming and sexual abuse and very stiff, strange, unresolved relationships with her parents, all present here. She is a drug addict and probably an alcoholic. Like, she is always high on some shit here, and she's always looking a mess or trying to not look a mess, and she has a very particular way of stylizing herself and interacting with the world. It was just really fascinating to exist in how dark of a space that she is, our main character. Like, the way that this book constructs that is really well rendered and compulsively readable. Like, I always wanted to be back in this world and see what other crazy shit she was up to. And it's written in a way that isn't terribly complicated. It's very straightforward. It uses a lot of like slang that I don't really understand as someone who isn't from the UK. And it also talks about these issues of like the positioning of class and place within the UK in a way that I find pretty interesting. So I really like this. This is like a 4.5 or maybe 5-star book. felt so specific to the time and place of the contemporary moment without feeling like it was trying to shove some sort of message down your throat, I guess. Like, it wasn't really about that as much as it is about a woman who is falling apart in so many ways, and all of her really problematic and fucked up and manipulative behaviors. The book that I read after that was Body Grammar by Jules, which I picked up after I finished Boy Parts in a bookstore. I think it's called Bibliothèque. It's like a bar bookstore in New York. I finished reading this and then I bought this because I was like, well, that was a good book. I need something else that's also pretty good. And I would say this is also a very good book. I rated it like 4 stars, maybe 4.5. I thought that it was really emotionally compelling. This book follows a teenage girl who is tall enough and skinny enough to like be a model, and she keeps on getting scouted as a young girl all the way up into her teen years for modeling, because she has the sort of like model look, but she's not really interested in all that. Like, that's not her world. It's set in the Pacific Northwest and it feels very rooted in that world. Our main character, she's in love with one of her best friends, of course, and that best friend, she's someone who is the lead singer in an indie band that she has with her friends. One summer, the group of them, like all their friends, go to like a university campus to do a show for the indie band, and then a really terrible tragedy happens. And after that happens, we see these different characters sort of spiral off their chosen paths or kind of redefine how they exist in the world. And our main character becomes a fashion model and dives headfirst into the world of high fashion and modeling. And we see her as she tries to navigate that, along with her love for her best friend and her coming into her own like androgynous look and butchness. One of the beginning scenes where she's going to the model casting place in Seattle or whatever, the agent woman is like, I don't mean this in like a bad way, but are you a boy or a girl? And she's like 17 at this time. So, I mean, I think this is a really beautiful love story and coming of age story and queer narrative that feels so Pacific Northwest-y in like vibe and circumstances and setting. And yeah, it was really beautiful and moving. There's a lot of talk about trauma and family and of course coming of age, coming to terms with yourself, encountering all these different people from all these different places in their lives and going along for the ride, the world of like fashion and that industry. It was all really, really like compelling and almost it kind of fast paced, yet very like slow moving in the prose. But what was happening was, whoa, so many things are changing. Our main character suffers from butch passivity, I would say. Her name is Lou also. Lou, another classic, name. But I think this book really reminds me of like Yerba Buena by Nina LaCour, but less of a romance as much as, well, I don't know. It just has a vibe. Like, if you like Yerba Buena, I think you would like this book. But also, this book is just a really solid. It also reminds me. This book reminds me of Sam by Allegra Goodman, as well. So yeah, it has that sort of vibe. I really enjoyed it. I had a great time reading this, and it was also very compulsively readable for me. All the different friendships and queer characters and the world that this main character embodies, it was really gorgeous, I think. So 4.5-ish stars. The next book that I read was Vagablonde by Anna Dorn, and this book was really interesting and fun and funny. So Vagabond follows this LA lawyer who is a rapper on like the side, and her stage name is Vagablonde. She's a white girl in LA, pretty privileged, and we see her try to pursue music as a career and the music scene of this world and the different people she encounters and the drug use and the recording studios and the pitchfork reviews, all of that, but also like her own reality as this woman who is trying to deal with all of this bullshit. She is gay. She has a girlfriend, and the girlfriend is like really supportive of her, whatever, but then shit goes down. Basically, this book was like fun and funny and a good time because our main character's voice is so distinct. I think Anna Dorn does a great job of writing these like female main characters, who feel so real and yet out of touch. Like, literally just the most delusional bitches imaginable. Anna Dorn can create them, and it's always hilarious. But I found that this book kind of lagged and was not as interesting to read in the second half as it was in the first. And the voice of the narrator, the voice of these characters became more and more almost like muddled and uninteresting and disengaging, and not as enchanting as it was within the first few pages. I don't know if the plot necessarily kept up with the pace of the storytelling and the narrative of what was being said here about the characters. I think Vagablonde, I had high expectations for going into it because I love, love, love Exalted by Anna Dorn. And I think there definitely is similarity there, but I think Vagabond in particular, I wasn't like my thing also because I'm not so into the world of like music and the music industry in that way. This like LA setting. It was always in an Uber and she's always doing Molly off someone's kitchen table. Like it was very that, I guess. She's like on the phone with her like WASP parents talking about how she's gonna not try to be a high-powered lawyer but rather pursue being a rapper. And it kind of feels like, I guess from the vibe, it's very like hyper pop. The type of music she makes, at least, is like what it seems that is what is happening. So it's interesting. And like the different verses that she writes and the rap lyrics that she pens, it's so like interesting and funny to see what she's like, I'm in the shower and I'm thinking like, so I thought it was like a fun time, a good time, and you should pick it up if that sounds interesting to you, but wasn't super my thing, especially as we kept on progressing in the book. So that was like a 3.5 star read for me. The next book that I read was Headshot by Rita Bullwinkel. This book is kind of a collection of different perspectives around a singular event that plays with like time and place. We kind of come into it within the setting of this youth girls wrestling tournament. We get the glimpses of all of these girls' lives after the tournament, how wrestling plays into their future careers, who they become, and how something so important in this very moment of trying to win the championship of like the all-girls wrestling team and who is up against who, how that is like a sort of myopic view of their lives at large. What feels like something so consequential in that moment and that plays out so dramatically is also a culmination of all of these girls' different relationships with their families and with each other and their reputations. And there's a really like major emphasis in this book about how irrelevant youth girls wrestling is, how just not legit and kind of made up and pulled together from random volunteer judges who, you know, the 5 people who read the girls magazine with the intros in them. Like, it's really a book that kind of brings to the forefront the ridiculousness of the situation and doesn't necessarily set the stakes that high for that reason. But of course, our main characters' perspectives are all super informed by that exact moment. And it's the narrator that tells us that, oh, she ends up being a pharmacist later on in her life, and this is what happens. And we get these just sort of like vignettes, and each chapter goes into another one of the girls who's competing and their lives later. I felt like the structure of this book was kind of interesting, and I didn't really know what was happening or where it was going for a lot of the book, because I was like, wait, okay, so we're following this girl who's competing, and then now you're telling me this is what she does in the future. Okay, and now these other girls and then I got more into the rhythm of it. I was like, oh, okay, we're like just following different girls and like their lives, but not in a really methodical, detailed way. It's just like a glimpse into their future. This was okay. I liked it. I thought it was good and well written and interesting and original, but I don't think it was necessarily a new favorite or anything. I think that stories about girls and women and how their lives play out across time over consequential and seemingly inconsequential moments of their lives is something I love reading about, so I enjoyed it. And I think I rated it 3.5 stars, so Yeah, you should pick it up if that sounds interesting to you. The cover is so cool. It also really made me want to reread it when I finished it. Like, after reading the whole book, I was like, oh, that's it? But like in a way that was like, wait, hold on. I think I missed something about, because there's so many different names of the girls and like biographical details about them that I couldn't really catch on to the first time around. So it's the type of novel that I would probably, in order to fully understand and unpack, I would want to revisit it. The next book that I read was Lesser Known Monsters of the 21st Century by Kim Fu. Thank you to the Libro FM ALC program for giving me this audiobook for free and for a review. If you guys want to get an audiobook or a Libro FM membership, you can use my affiliate link down below if you would like to, but you know, no pressure obviously. But I really liked this. I thought this was a really interesting short story collection. I rated it like 4 stars. There were different stories in here that really like got me going. I was like really into it. I think there was a lot of exploration of themes of like childhood and coming of age here, and the fantasy world and magic that exists in childhood that becomes literalized in these stories, as well as the intimate relationships that you have with lovers, partners, family, and what occurs in the cracks between them. There's the story about a girl who starts growing wings, but like in a very weird, it just becomes part of the pubescent coming of age thing in this naturalized form. There's a story called June Bugs that is about this woman who's like taking care of a house for the summer, and it's just infested with these bugs, and her neighbor like won't help her with it, and she just has to deal with it. There's the opening story is a simulation experience where this woman is wanting to patronize this simulation experience with specific memories, and the operator of the experience is like, no, we can't do that for you, and they have a back and forth. That was interesting. There's a story about this husband and wife couple that have a body replicating machine in their house, so they can like kill each other and just recreate the other person, and that person won't remember that they were killed by their partner. And it becomes kind of a weird game. And there's also a story of like a doll, a haunted doll from this tragedy within this suburban American cookie cutter neighborhood, and what happens in the aftermath of a tragedy there. There were good stories in here. I would rate it like 4 stars, 3.5 stars. It kind of reminded me of like Out There by Kate Folk. It sort of had those weird speculative vibes set in a really like realistic character and relationship dynamic world. That's something that I really enjoy, like, you know, thinking about themes about life and stuff, but from different perspectives. It also kind of reminds me of like Saraland or other sort of weird magical realism short stories that deal with girlhood, womanhood, coming of age, and also relationships and technology. And it feels like all the futuristic and fantastical elements are integrated in a way that feels, you know, mimetic and true to life. Like the circumstances are not too dramatic, even as these technologies that are in the story that define the story's plot are dramatic. The next book that I read was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, and I've had this book on my shelf for like a million years, so I'm glad I finally got to it, you know, like years after everyone has already read it and rated it highly, and it's won like the Booker or whatever. I listened to the audiobook of this, and I thought that that was a good experience. The way that this world is constructed and how this past meets future meets present thing that's going on here of an endless labyrinth, but a world that exists within its own world. It feels kind of like a less grounded in reality in some ways version of like The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. It feels like a way of sort of uncovering and unpeeling this sort of alchemistic old magic thing and battle of academic thought versus reality. There's a lot of playing with like time and understanding of truth and bending reality here. It was interesting. It was like an immersive time and experience. And I understand what people are saying when they're like, just go into this book blind. Like, you shouldn't know anything about it when you read it. Like, before you read it, before you pick it up, don't like look for plot summaries. So I won't go into too much more about it, but I liked it. I rated it 4 stars. I think that It's a solid novel, and it does something fantastical and pushes imagination in a really interesting way. I think it might be a little overhyped, but I thought it was solid. I thought it was fun and interesting, and the darkness of this world as it becomes revealed was really compelling. The experience of like isolation that our main character Piranesi has is so piercing, and I think that that is a standout element of this novel. The next book that I read was The Z Word by Lindsay King Miller. I also read this book thanks to the Libro FM ALC program, so I listened to this audiobook. I thought that this was like solid, okay? Like 3 stars. It's a contemporary fiction novel that is very rooted in this, like, I think it's like this small southwestern town, and what happens when sort of the zombie apocalypse like becomes triggered in the midst of Pride, and we kind of see the like inter-community queer politics and drama of this little world as our main character is reeling from the aftermath of this like really intense lesbian relationship, many such cases. And it starts off at this like party. It's a party that's like co-sponsored by this like hard seltzer company. It's kind of a fun, hokey time. It feels kind of campy and like a slasher that is supposed to be kind of funny kind of vibe. Like, it feels cinematic in that way. There's a lot of gore and violence and just insane gay people and like weird gay drama and characters who are kind of like one note or kind of cartoonish, but it's intentional, you know? It's like archetypes that play into this genre. Everyone is kind of annoying and everyone is kind of an idiot. And you figure out what the hell is going on with this whole zombie situation way before anyone in the book does. And I think that, like, I mean, the title itself is pretty clever. Like, the Z word, like, the L word, you know, all the stupid drama and who's sleeping with who and whatever. The open relationships, the marriages, it's all this, but of course, zombies. So it's a fun time. I think that if you're into that sort of like horror type thing that doesn't take itself too seriously and speaks to sort of like societal issues and whatever, this would be a fun one to pick up if you want something light and bloody and gruesome to read. So yeah, that's a 3 star. The next book that I read was The English Understand Wool by Helen DeWitt. This was a really interesting, very short novel. It's like 60 pages. I think that this book did something both very expected and unexpected within the short page count that it has. 17-year-old girl is like very precocious and very strange, and it's because of how she was raised. She was raised by like billionaires. Like, she's so wealthy, you cannot even imagine it. Like, the type of wealthy that they have the Ritz on speed dial and they have a specific Yamaha piano or whatever that is put in their room. Her mom had a tailor whom she put up an apartment for in Paris. Like, that type of rich. One day her parents disappeared, and so now she's like writing this novel. She's writing a book about what is happening, or what happened, basically, or like her perspective being raised by these like con artists or whatever. And yeah, so this book is very short. It's a one sit read. I probably read it in like 2 sittings before bed, and I thought that it was kind of interesting, kind of weird, very off-putting and distanced in the way that the voice of the character is supposed to be. She has these different interactions that are so interesting. And yeah, it's a really like a look into the world of the uber wealthy and like how they work and the generosity that is involved there, as well as the violence in many ways. And yes, it was very interesting. I rated it 4 stars. I think that it has a very memorable voice in terms of the writing, and it's not really pushing any particular I think, like, theme or idea here, or agenda. You know how, like, some books are very clearly an agenda focused novel that doesn't focus as much on, like, the art of the thing? Yeah, I'm getting sick of those types of books, I feel like. But this one, it was pretty good. I liked it. 4 stars. Then the next book that I read was Mona at Sea by Elizabeth Gonzalez James. I read this book 3 stars because I liked the beginning of this novel, and then as things progressed, I was like, oh, this is kind of corny and cheesy. Again, like, it's that thing of, like, kind of shoving a particular message down your throat in a way. It's about this woman named Mona, obviously, who moves back home to somewhere in Arizona that she hates and where she's grown up. Both her parents are, like, bio academics. They're, like, professors who, like, study Alzheimer's or whatever. And her parents are going, like, something's happening. She's moved back home with them, and the home life there is weird. She has a younger brother who's, like, a frat bro who is very well-meaning. And Mona has graduated into the 2008 or 2009 recession. She majored in finance, and she had a job set up at one of the companies or the financial institutions that, like, went bankrupt the day of she arrived there with her suitcase, and basically she became a video of her, that of, like, a reporter being like, how do you feel, like, this being your first day but the company dissolving, so you know, have no job and nowhere to go. And she's like crying on camera, and basically that clip of her is, like, gone viral, and so people recognize her as sad millennial. She struggles with self-harm, and she has, like, this sort of, you know, gifted kid burnout type thing going for her, where she was, like, super high achieving all throughout school, was really high achieving in, like, college, and was set up to, like, you know, go into the world of finance and tear it down and, like, shatter glass ceilings and whatnot. But that isn't what happened for her. And so now she's, like, depressed, living at home, being forced to go to these, like, job seeker group meetings in, like, a church basement run by this, like, really nice woman. We just see her as she struggles to, like, find a job, struggles with her place in the world and what she wants, and the sort of, like, postgraduate depression that she's hit with, of, like, not knowing what the fuck she wants to do with her life and how she's gonna achieve it, why she wants those things. And so it's really an interrogation of, like, her, you know, desires and expectations. And sorry if the setup has shifted a bit. My card was full. So anyway, it has all those themes involved, and yet I found it sort of corny and, like, kind of, like, underwritten in a lot of ways. And I found that, like, the themes of, like, self-harm and what should my career look like, how do I fit within a family that feels broken, all of that, it felt very, at some points, like, melodramatic and, yeah, just, like, corny. It was too, I don't know, but I still don't think that this was a bad book. I think that it was solid, and the story here is interesting, and this character is interesting. Like, she is someone who's very snarky and, like, self-deprecating, and she has this sort of, like, not like other girls vibe going on. It's realistic, and it is, like, a snapshot of the way that things were back then. I mean, it was, like, 15 years ago at this point. But yeah, it was interesting. I liked it, but not, I think it has a lot of flaws. So yeah, 3-star book. And then finally, the most recent book that I have finished, and potentially the last book that I read in May, was Behind You is the Sea by Susan Mauddi Darraj. I'm pronouncing her name wrong, I'm so sorry. But this book is set in Baltimore, and it's kind of a collection of interwoven short stories about Palestinian Americans in Baltimore, and it's people from all different walks of life, young women and girls, and a man who is a cop, an older father of a groom, like, all these different perspectives. And you see the way that the class and wealth disparities within this community is so, you know, crucial to what is happening in the landscape of this world, the way that these different characters interact with each other on the basis of those things, how gender within this Arab American community is policed, how the reputation and honor of families leads to a lot of rifts, complicated relationships you have with people you're grieving or with grief and loss. Also, like Palestinian American, Palestinian identity and how that exists in this particular world and setting. It was really compelling and emotionally wrought, and the way that all these different characters would pop up here and there as the cousin of a family member or someone you know in the community or someone you work for, and all of that was really, it was really interesting. Like in one story we follow this woman who is married to her husband who goes back to Palestine for the death of a family member. She has quit her job, like basically to full-time help raise her autistic child, and the relationship between her and her husband has gotten progressively worse, but then something on social media has sparked some sort of situation and she's like, what's going on? And then she is trying to deal with a public school system that like doesn't want to be ADA compliant and like help her child. And so she hires this lawyer, and that lawyer sets them right. And then in another chapter later on in the book, we follow that lawyer's perspective and like what she has been dealing with. And yeah, we see a lot of the sort of patriarchal, misogynistic bullshit that these women have to go through being in these communities and living in the world at large, what the expectations of family for different people and the responsibilities that different characters take onto themselves and feel that they hold. And it was really emotionally compelling. It felt very realistic. It felt like these characters were real people who existed. It felt very much like it was cobbled together from the life that our author has lived. So it felt real in that way. It felt like a genuine portrayal of a community that is so wide-ranging in experience. I mean, I didn't really like that we followed a cop main character in like two of these stories, but I was like, I get, okay, sure, whatever. I mean, but like I don't think, there's only one offhand mention of his dad or something not liking his job. I think this book isn't political messaging in any particular way in terms of trying to characterize any particular experience or identity in a social justice message oriented manner, as much as it was a glimpse, a window into the lives of people who are struggling with things and have joyous moments and have moments of terror and horror. And yeah, like people who have different relationships to identities of Americanness and experiences of Americanness or Palestinian identity. And yeah, it was really beautiful. What I mean by it not being like political, I mean, I think all literature is political, but like, I don't think that this is the type of book that you can necessarily point to and articulate as being of having any particular revolutionary politic or politic of Palestine at large. It's just these experiences of people who are in the diaspora for one reason or the other, and people who are dealing with it and enjoying it or disliking it for one way or the other, and the tragedy, the generational trauma of being Palestinians who have migrated to the US. And yeah, it was really beautiful. It was really interesting. I thought it was a really good realistic fiction short story collection, and I rated it like 4 stars because I think that the story isn't really, doesn't have like a 5-star vibe to me, although I was so immersed in this world as I was reading it. The way that I think gender is really articulated in this book and in the narrative of these characters, what they're dealing with, they're, I think, in a similar way, parallel to that, it kind of falls short on some other things. So, hence, like the cop brother. But yeah, that's all I have for you. Those are all the books that I read in May so far. We'll see if I'll read any more later this month. I've started an Ursula Le Guin book, so tune in next month to see what it is, I guess. And, my future wrap-ups. Sorry again for the wrap-up pile-up that was happening. It's happening in the beginning of 2024, where I hadn't filmed any, and then now I'm, like, backed up with this shit. But, you know, that's just how it is sometimes, and thank you so much for watching my videos regardless. Please like this video, subscribe, join my bindery, which is kind of like my Patreon if you'd like to, and you should leave an emoji of your favorite fruit in the comments if you get to this part of the video. I would say my favorite fruits are probably watermelon and peaches. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in my next video, hopefully. Bye!